In a world that walks the line, there's a rare few who think outside the box together form a crew to break the equations, not bound to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe is all view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Bill. It's Joe. What's going on, brother?
Hey everybody, happy Saturday. Coming live to you from Tuesday. We figured it out. We've cracked the code.
That's right. We're not going to be there on Saturday recorded early. There you go.
Yeah,
All right,
still all love to everybody though.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little under the ground, little inner Earth theories, and kind of some of the stuff that we've all heard about them. You know, little Agartha. So, Joe, why don't you start us off just a little bit?
All right. Well, yeah, let's take a trip to Agartha. That sounds good. You know, how do you get into Agartha, right? It seems like there's a lot of different, conspiracy theories, so to speak, around that, right? Do you get in through Mount Shasta and, Mount MFPs, or, do you get in through the Mariana Trench and you go to the bottom of the ocean and all of a sudden there's a cave that's your way in? Or I think obviously the one that everybody would know is, right, you going through Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Antarctica is like a whole nother topic all on itself, I'd have to say. I'd love to see what's beneath that ice, but all things being considered, it's really fascinating and plausible at the same time that there could be something more to the undersurface of our own planet that then meets the eye. It's completely plausible that you go deep into a cave and, in the back end of this cave, you're able to enter into a place where there's a whole nother, forms of life going on. We haven't found humans or humanoids in that sense, right? But we found entirely different cave species, for instance, that exist in the complete absence of, light and general atmospheric conditions.
So do you think they maybe get to a lava tube or something that came up from the center?
Well, I mean, seeing as it's all very speculative at best in the first place, I mean, I think anything is possible. Right? A lava flow or something like that sure could be some kind of pathway. But I think more plausibly, it would probably be some type of surface opening. If you want to think about it as, high intelligent, high advanced type of entities that may be, under the surface of the earth, like some people say, like lizard people, or, you got Hillary Clinton really lives underneath the surface of the earth or whatever,
Lizard people.
Right. Right. Everyone's running out of Washington, D.C. right now to dig their home. But, nonetheless, if it isn't like an advanced, species or race or something like that, and they have technology or knowledge that we're not familiar with, maybe they don't need an opening at all, right? Maybe there's a way to actually transcend from below the Earth's surface to the surface without needing what we would consider to be a normal pathway or clearing.
Like a portal of some sort?
Sure.
I like the Admiral Byrd.
Yeah.
Flying over top, they caught his airplane, sucked him in. You know what I mean? Gave him the right flight path. That's always been the best one to me, because it's like, oh yeah, we're in it now. Like, what do you sit there and think about that, man? There's just UFOs all around me, and I'm being sucked into this big hole.
I mean, I think what's interesting is that when you think about it, sometimes, like, and I'm not giving any credence to any of this, so I think it's important that I put it out there, but it's a great subject worth talking about, I think, nonetheless, right?
Uh-huh.
The Admiral Byrd story is one of those situations where, like, if it is the truth, the truth, like, often, like, it gets so much stranger than reality.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the truth, right? And you could just make a movie out of that situation if they haven't already. Where because the his writing, was brief but detailed, and there could be a whole entire plot line filled around this, where he comes into this into like the hole in Antarctica, and then the UFOs are like buzzing around him, and they're talking to him in the radio, and at first in German, then in English, sort of story. And then you wonder what they did with the all the soon to be war prisoners after World War II. They all fled to South America, then to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Weird and
Well,
interesting stuff.
if they did talk to him in German first, then man, maybe there's more there than we thought, huh? They let in a bunch of Germans, and then he comes along.
Well, wasn't that kind of the story? It was UFOs, but they weren't alien UFOs. They were German UFOs.
Yeah, I heard a couple stories where they took the U-boats in and checked it out, made an underground base out there in Antarctica. Then I think the Admiral Byrd story was separate. We went there and they wanted him to be I don't want to say like an envoy. I'm probably saying the word wrong. But they wanted him to go over and talk to the U.S. government and tell them to stop the nuclear weapons and stuff like that. And, you know what I mean? Make a peace thing, which makes me wonder, you were mentioning earlier that maybe they're the true keepers of the planet. You know what I mean? Some kind of people like that are in inner Earth.
Yeah, and that does make me kind of like wonder too, that if we've established that there's time dilation fields that occur naturally as a result of the Earth's own forces and magnetic fields, that when you reach the surface of the Earth, that you become in sort of like a different gradient of that time dilation. And maybe just by virtue of living off the surface of the planet, you could live substantially longer lives, and become like a keeper of the Earth. And it raises the question, like you said kind of earlier, where when people were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, after Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, were they kicked out of a place to another place on Earth? Or were they kicked out of the underlayers of Earth to the surface? And as the Bible kind of goes on, in the later passages and everything like that, and especially when like Dante's Inferno and all that kind of came out too, that sort of forbade and made it like taboo, the whole idea of the inner Earth being a forbidden place that you'd never want to go. That's where hell resides, right? So it's like, keep out of it.
Well, what if it's like a misinterpretation of like Adam and Eve when they got kicked out? Maybe they weren't the best of people or something when they started. Like they were just, rebelling against the way that things were done forever. And they didn't understand truly what all the technology was, and they just wanted to do it themselves. So they said, well, here's your banishment. Go to the surface and learn it. And when you learn it, you can come back. It could be something as simple as that. It could be the true way the Bible tells it. It could just be a story to keep yourself in the right mindset. So I always thought that was interesting. I think they, if there is a civilization under the surface of the earth, they have to be more advanced than us. They have to see things different. And time dilation is a real thing. NASA's saying that they proved it with the people in the space station being up there for so long that they, their internal clock would be different than ours here on the surface. They would, I don't remember if it was, they lived 1 day longer than us or something like that. But that's what I believe I was reading. So would that go opposite? Like you were saying, would they get younger coming in? Would their days expand? Would time slow down? That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And it's kind of interesting too to think that like if your biology kind of evolved to exist in a certain level of time dilation, right? If you abruptly were to enter into faster, slower time dilation zones by going under the earth, let's just say, everything may perceivably seem to go faster because of your biology too, and just like your overall
Mm.
frame rate, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
Um, until you become accustomed to that sort of thing, I suppose, if you're capable of it. Uh, and I think that there is capability of that because we've discussed things like that in the past too about the time dilation within the mind that exists. Um,
that's
yeah,
like
no,
a
it's all interesting stuff.
that's like a portal with mushrooms. You know what I mean? Here, take all these magic mushrooms and go through this portal, and by the other side, you're gonna be tripping balls when you get down there. You know what I mean?
All right.
You're not gonna know what to think of it.
Well, I mean, that's sort of it. I mean, and who's to say that chemically that those states couldn't necessarily be objectively induced? You know, maybe it's more, uh, and really my experience isn't here, so it's not like I could talk super firsthand, but who's to say that those chemical responses uh, to psychedelics and stuff like that are subjective? Who's to say that that's not objective at that point? And then that's unquantifiable. It becomes there's no real measure
That'd
for
be a
that.
trip. Remember the book Journey to the Center of the Earth? Come across the big mushrooms. They come across, you know what I mean? Everything's super huge. Dinosaurs are down there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I
So,
mean that's what Bird said, didn't he, when he was flying over Antarctica? That what caught his eye was that right under the surface it was green and there were woolly mammoths
yeah,
just grazing right on the surface of Antarctica. Yeah.
yeah. That'd be a whole trip in itself. I mean, I guess. I mean, if you saw that flying by just normally, wouldn't you go down there and just take one more peek, closer look?
I mean, how could you not? How could you not? You're flying over like a solid frozen glacier, and you see that. Yeah, that's worth putting the landing gear down for, I think.
Yeah, I think so too, man. Some of the things are probably in there. Do you remember that book? And I don't remember the name of it. It had a bunch of stuff in there with plants that weren't recognized by anyone here on the surface of the earth. And then there was a bunch of things about women in bathtubs and stuff like that. And then it detailed parts.
Oh, yeah, that's the the Voynich manuscripts.
There you go.
Right, yeah. Nobody could decipher that. It's indecipherable, but yet it follows like all the laws of a normal language, but nobody could translate it, and all the all the pictures are the most outlandish things that you could possibly imagine.
Oh, yeah. Plant species are all different, but the guy had a fascination with women in bathtubs. So, what if that's just like an inner Earth thing? Maybe not the women in the bathtub. Maybe that was just him.
But
But some of the plants and stuff.
is that just an inner Earth thing? I mean, hot springs are some of the most widely sought after, destinations on the entire planet. Whether you're in Japan or Iceland or at the Dead Sea or and any of these things, like all these like natural springs and bathing spots are the massive destinations.
Well, yeah, if they all came up as springs, that'd be fine. But he was literally Mr. Bathtub. Eh, yeah, it was a little bit different there. It was
Yeah,
like
no,
a fascination.
yeah, he was weird.
That the springs would make sense. See, that'd be too much on the side that made sense.
Well, he combined objects and nature and just like messed up biology and stuff. Like he had like a foot with like a foot head with a leg in between, and then like another set of like legs where it would just like it would just like spin itself, and like a face in the middle. It's like weird stuff like that. I mean, I was actually gonna buy a copy of it, like one of the copies of the manuscript, but they're exceedingly difficult to find and very expensive. And
Oh, really?
I made it hard to like commit to it, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, I want to say like a newer copy was, you know, over $200.
Oh wow! And they don't
Yeah,
have some kind of college thing that has it up on the website or anything like that.
I like things like that. I like to have, you
Oh,
know, like, and it doesn't. It's not the same when it's on your screen or printed from your printer or whatever. You know, it's like you pick up the book and that's it. That's the thing.
there's a whole joy in reading from a book, right?
Well, you're not reading much of anything in that because if you actually knew what it was saying, you know, like you probably have some kind of recognition coming your way.
Yeah. Well, so if they lived in a different time, they probably lived longer. That's what we would suppose, right? So we look at the King's List and how long everybody lived there. Would that be something that maybe they weren't talking about the civilization on the surface of the planet? Maybe that King's List is not meant for us here, but for them down there.
That well could be. I mean, I think that there's been accounts, no matter where in the world you are, that you know, our ancestors millennia ago lived significantly longer lives than we do, and you know that seems to be consistent uh, throughout all of history. And maybe what we're missing is that after supposing that we were exiled out of the middle of the earth or whatever, right, to the
Hmm.
surface, it seems like there probably would have been a period of time where like we still had communication with those under the surface. And
Yeah,
it probably wasn't until like the Great Flood, you know, and the Younger Dryas, or like maybe right after that point, that was the cessation of the communication.
maybe we didn't live up to the standards that they have, and they decided to let nature take its course and wipe us out and start over.
Yeah, well, let nature take its course, or did they possibly have a hand in it? If that's what we're if we're, you know, speculating on it, who's to say they didn't cause it?
Yeah, well, that's true. It could have. I mean, I would think it might be, like a pole reversal or something like that that happens every so many years, and they maybe just didn't lift a finger to help us. But you might be right. They might have been like, well, you guys suck, so let's just flush the toilet under civilization and see how many of you can float to the surface.
Yep, learn to swim.
That's right. There was a story about two children. I think it was a little boy, little girl, and I think they were blue or green, and I can't remember. They came from a cave or something underground, and they grew up with people in like a farming community. And I think the little boy died, and the little girl lived. And from where they were from, they couldn't get back, and they lived a normal life, but their skin color was different when they came out. Did you remember that story?
I had heard that story before. I can't say that I recall much more detail than what you've already said, but you know, and probably under the surface drinking that colloidal silver or something like that turned them blue.
Well, is the sunlight different though? I mean, because you're not getting direct sunlight down there, so our pigment of our skin may be directly related to the environment we're in.
Well, right, but I mean, as we know about how the progression of magnetic fields ultimately go, if you have, you know, I would think that there's a alternative form of luminescence potentially under the surface of the Earth, that would stand to reason, um, and not necessarily like how magma glows and lets off like radiant energy and heat, right? But
Hmm.
just like we know that there's kind of two sides to every um, field system in our magnetic field, right? We know that we have plasmas and stuff that are, you know, at the higher levels of our Earth's magnetic sphere. Sorry, I can't speak. Um, magnetic sphere, right? And
Uh-huh.
then who's to say that at the inside you don't have the inverse of that too? And you know, like if that's in proximity to different minerals and things of that nature, maybe there's a type of luminescence that we're just not familiar with.
Mm. So we don't get the direct color of the sun. We get a different color. So like I was saying, our skin changes a little bit. So that'd be interesting. Maybe one of those genes that's locked up in our body we don't know is there. That would be ironic, wouldn't it? Hey, we're all really blue people that come out of the center of the earth, so all of your racial stuff is ignorant. I mean,
Yeah, right.
now you got to deal with we're the blue people.
Right. Well, I'm
You
telling
know,
you, there was that blue guy, and I mean, he was blue.
they always report like what is it, the blonde aliens and stuff like that, blue pigment on their skin, stuff like that. The good ones, where the gray ones are, just out to probe you and then throw you back.
Yeah, isn't that the way? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy stuff, man. Like, what I think is interesting is how we've never really gotten that far into the surface, and that actually getting any sort of reading of what the Earth's composition looks like beyond just speculation was really only possible after we got satellites up in space. Because how else are you supposed to get, enough imagery of the Earth from far enough away to be able to get any sort of information about what could lie underneath even just like the surface layer? That's sort of what that boils down to. And now we could hit it with lidar, but that only goes so far down, right?
but didn't the
And
Russians dig, 26 miles into the crust of the earth?
yeah, they've been that far down, which is very far, but it's still not. That's still not even a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, well, they called it what, the demon hole, where like there was all kinds of sounds and screaming, and
Yeah, said the screams of hell were coming out of the hole.
but like the reflection of all the radio signals, but combined into a horrible backwards running, disc that like a what's that called? The little black ones that they used to run a record, run it backward. That's what I
Yeah,
meant.
yeah,
Sorry.
kind of a lot like that. You're right. But yeah, I mean, that was a great attempt, but it didn't get anywhere, and we don't really have a great way, even to this day, to be able to really get further than that. And in fact, some of the best opportunities we have for digging does lie like at places like Antarctica and whatnot, because the ice is just simply that deep. And then at least they could get ice core samples from, you know, 10, 12 plus miles down. And what's amazing about those ice core samples is that, you know, some of it's been frozen since more or less like almost like the formation of the planet,
Yeah.
and they were finding like all sorts of life that they didn't expect to see even at those times, and like totally alternative stuff. I listen, not for anything, that kind of opens up a whole nother can of worms about like, well, now you have all this bacteria from millions or billions of years ago or whatever that you're kind of like defrosting and it's coming back to life and stuff. I think that's a whole nother subject matter, but you know, that's something they're doing.
Well, instead of digging, maybe it's natural, like you were saying earlier, like Mel's Hole. You know what I mean?
Hmm?
The satellites put a cover on Mel's Hole. Maybe it was too big. But anyway, they said that they would throw things in there like all day long and they wouldn't come back, or like somebody's animal would be thrown in there. And maybe I'm mixing stories, but the animal would come back to life or something. It just crazy stuff.
Yeah, and the science that's kind of like associated with stuff like that. I mean, you want to talk about like the stuff we talk about is like mainstream compared to how fringe that those ideas are, but it's not like there's not some sort of like theories that don't exist as to how something like that could plausibly exist. I think one thing that's super interesting is just like anything in nature, there's degrees of symmetry, right? That occur, like repeating patterns and symmetries. Everything kind of works like a mirror in a sense, right? So,
Hmm. Well, what
it's possible that if you get to a certain point down, that there's like a mirroring effect, You know,
Well, they say some medicine men can bring back the body, but your soul can't be brought back. So if it went down in the hole and it got reanimated, I mean, that would make sense, but it also makes sense that it had absolutely zero memory of what it was.
mm-hmm.
So would that be the standoff nature of the animal after that?
That could be that the dog that didn't know its owner, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I really think that mirrors are something we need to like really think a lot more about, just because of how fascinating they are with all their reflection and refraction properties and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, just what makes that occur in the first place. I think that that's something super fascinating. But I think that um, there are such things as natural mirrors through the different fields of the planet and stuff that do exist, and maybe something like that could be at play there. Um, it sort of is, and it turns into something like a little bit like like a dream state. You know, have you ever had a dream where it's really familiar, right? Like the place or something is really familiar, but it's not the same, and it
Yeah.
becomes like it becomes like uncanny, right? So like it's interesting because it's like a mirror state where it's like what you're looking at, but the inverse of it.
Hmm. Like the familiarity of you've been there before, but it's not anything like the place you were in.
Right, exactly. Like you know you've been there before. You could even identify the place, but you're looking around and you're like, but this isn't it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're looking through somebody else's eyes.
Yeah, or like yeah, exactly. Or just like living through a time in the, you know, at another point, you know, like almost like an alternative like universe sort of situation where it's like the same similar but different.
Have you ever tried to see yourself in a dream, Joe? Like, not like look in the mirror, but like see yourself doing things in the dream while still looking through your eyes.
You mean as a third party to yourself?
Yeah. Or it could even be like just you see yourself doing something in a scenario instead of you living it.
I feel like I have. I mean, I know I have in other contexts. Um, like you know, one time I was in like a you know, like sort like a sleep paralysis state, right? We were talking about that the other day, right? I was in a sleep paralysis state, except I actually went with it, and I actually like got up and went to the bathroom and went into my fridge, and then went to go get back in bed and thought nothing of it. And then I'm like, oh, damn it, I'm in bed. And then I go and I like just get in bed, and then I try again to get out of bed, to go to the bathroom, you know, this, that, the next thing. And I had to try like 3 and 4 times, you know, to like actually be awake and actually feel my. Then that was the crazy thing, was that's how I knew I was awake. Was I realized that even though I was feeling before, the floor didn't feel cold and the floor felt cold. And that's how I was like, oh, there's something different about this. The floor feels cold. I was like, I am awake. And that time I was awake. But I couldn't tell the difference. And every time I returned to my bed, I was laying in my bed and I saw myself laying in my bed. And
That's
it
the
was
truth.
really frustrating because like I was doing everything that I had to do.
Yeah, it's hard, man, because I think half the dream states are like pre-programmed, and then once in a while you get to take over, but it's only when you reach the level of consciousness inside of your dream. So, and that probably has to do with more of a meditation level at that point because you're not fully asleep, but you're not fully awake.
It does, because I can tell you that like I dream almost every night, and very rarely am I not lucid in my dream. And what's interesting about that is, you know, being lucid in your dreams doesn't give you necessarily full reign like people like to try and say it does. So yes, you could direct it, and yes, like if you want something to happen and you're in that level of control in those moments, then you can make that happen. But more times than not, like you're still like not choosing your scenario, so to speak. You're just kind of in that scenario, and then you're like, oh, I'm dreaming, so let me be lucid about it, and then you're acting
Yeah.
as yourself within the parameters kind of already set up.
Yeah, see, that kind of sucks. I always wanted to build things in my dream that I wanted to build in real life, but just have the ability to like put it in there in your mind and just move it with your hands like this. Kind of like Tony Stark did in Iron Man, where he blew it up, was able to throw things out and then take things and put it in. That's kind of, I would love to be able to do that. So, yeah, I've never gotten there. You get to the point where somebody's trying to tell you something coming into the dream or out of the dream, but never to the point where I got to control everything. Like I get a lot of messages like coming out of the dream. In that last second that you're there, you'll get a specific image. And if you can like write down that image right away, then you got something special because usually it's an important answer to what you were thinking.
Yeah, so controlling the dream state's an interesting thing because it's something that you could definitely do with practice. I think that the reason that I equate the dream state to the under earth is because there's a part of me that feels like if there is something down there, it's probably more of like an ethereal type entity that might not be like a physical human as we kind of expect it to be. It may just be like a form of sentient energy, something of that nature that kind of resides in a dream state all the time. So I kind of equate, the dream state and control in the dream state to what could potentially be there. Now, maybe they could manifest as something more than just, some type of sentient ethereal energy or something like that, supposing that there's anything down there at all, right? But that's sort of how I draw the relationship. That there's something in our DNA that allows us to be able to access these dream states, and through spiritual and psychological practices, be able to sort of overcome it and be able to be in control enough of the dream state to have a more organic, so to speak, experience that might be quite similar to what an ethereal being might experience.
So let's take it in a little different direction. Say we're a Buddhist monk or in the temple up on one of the hills. You know what I mean? The way that they get into their meditation and stuff. Do you think that might just be a kind of like a mirrored state of what happens in the inner earth? That's how they do it, but for multiple years more. You know what I mean? Say it's like 300 years, 400 years more than what the monks get to do, but it's the exact same process.
I mean, that could well be. At the same time, if there's any sort of fundamental difference between somebody living below the surface and up on the surface, we might, let me rephrase this. We may be attempting in certain circumstances to achieve what they already have naturally. So they may not need to undergo those same processes that we do, in order to have that same level of being in existence. So they wouldn't necessarily have to dedicate their lives to all of these, higher self practices in order to achieve these states of mind. Because you got to remember something. When you're practicing for these highest states, it becomes almost impossible to reach the highest, okay, if you have attachments, okay, and those attachments are friends and family and responsibilities to others and doing things onto others, out of expectation and things, because all of those things are pressure on your system, right?
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons that no matter what theology you're speaking of, all the highest in them are not a priest going in front of a parish and speaking and interacting or anything like that. They're often a monastery somewhere in a cave, in the Bavarian mountains. They're at the foothills of Mount Everest, or they're in a monastery, a Tibetan monastery. They're removing themselves from general society and the pressures of general society to have this level of dedication where nobody's really relying on them and they're cared for. Therefore, they're able to fully give themselves back too. Now, if you have something that already can achieve that state without that level of sacrifice, then you're able to have a much higher functioning society. So you could actually participate in society because your base level is at that point.
So kind of like the young monks come in, they do the chores, they also talk and greet people and do things like that. But the older ones sit and meditate and they're left alone and they're able to get into that state. But you're saying in the inner earth, they already have it. So say if they didn't need to see so much, so senses are dulled, but some of the senses in your brain might pick up. Maybe you don't need to hear so much. So some of those things that you would normally come through your hearing would just be transferred into your brain as the frequency itself. So you're in a closer contact with it already.
Right. Basically by being within Earth and surrounded by Earth without all the ambient disturbances that occur at the surface, you're able to just be at a constant state of Schumann resonant frequency, just as your native ambient frequency.
Oh, you might have already tuned into that right away, where it would take forever for us to get there, right?
Right. For you to be able to reduce your brainwave patterns to like 7 hertz, 8 hertz would take a very long, and it's achievable. But like even with testing and stuff like that, it's usually for very small durations of time that the brain could hold those types of low wave patterns. So, and that's like almost proof in the pudding of time dilation, because it's during those lowest frequency patterns that what they would consider to be like REM states and whatnot, like high degrees of like dreaming and rapid eye movement and all this stuff, right? That's when that stuff takes place most prevalently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're in this low frequency state for 1 or 2 minutes, objectively you could feel like that's an ongoing situation for hours, because because of the time dilation that occurs because of the low frequency. So it's very cool stuff.
It could go into a beat frequency at that point between you and the earth, and then that would be hard to get out of. But if you had learned it from the beginning, that would be a pretty easy state to sit into and meditate.
For sure. And what's crazy is if you have a resonant frequency that's that low to begin with, if you were to reduce your frequency even further, at some point you clock out entirely. And I think that's the point to make. If you hit a frequency that's on the other side of Planck's distance, where it's immeasurable, an immeasurably small period of time with the waveform, right? You clock out of time entirely. You come back in. It's not a matter of that, but you could clock out of time entirely. And if it's on both directions of the waveform, both, then you could clock out of time and space entirely. And that what's interesting about that is that could be where these uncanny events come from. Because if you clock out of space and you interject yourself into a circumstance that's familiar because that's where you just are, you might not even be clocking yourself into the same space that existed in your memory, right? It could just be a similar circumstance, and the dream state's super fascinating. And like I said, that could tie directly into inner Earth. And, it could also tie directly into UFOs and stuff like that too, how they come directly out of the water or fly directly into the side of a mountain and things like that. So if they don't want to be detected, let's just say, they could potentially travel back in time to a point where we didn't have any detection method and enter a space in the past, but then fast forward to the future and just be there.
You know what? Maybe it's just when we see them go towards the mountain, they're already out of phase with the Earth itself. So we think it's going into the mountain. Maybe their projected target is maybe 200 miles from there, 100 miles from there. And we just see the state where they were last at. But then they dilate right out of our time. So right out of our entire existence that we know to be solid matter is no longer there for them. So they shoot right through it, and we're just seeing the remnants of it.
Yeah, and you're dead on with like the whole the phase transition thing once you become out of phase, because that seems to be a hot topic on a lot of the other podcasts now, which is directly correlated to things that we've talked about in the past without going too deep into it. But when we talk about flipping the fields and blah blah blah, all this stuff, right? It's all relevant. It's taking something that's like this and getting it to go like this, right? So that's sort of the deal. Across the board, it's been a big hot topic lately about just like making parallel poles just shift.
Well, I think it's a little different. We're how is it? We're like this now. We're looking for this.
Right, parallel.
Yeah, we're looking, but in a certain direction.
Yep. Sorry, yeah, I was inverse on it, but yeah, I mean that's what I was meaning by it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I think that's really cool, man, because that brings up a whole new thing about inner Earth. Like they literally go wherever they want. There is no barrier. So we said, how did they get there? Maybe that's just it. Like you were saying, maybe not a portal like we would think, like, hey, let's walk through here. We journey out to a hole somewhere. And maybe it's just that right there. They dilate the time in order to push, right through solid matter.
Yeah, and like, even though I could come up with I'm not sure, but here's my theory, and this is out of everything I know and all the horseshit and whatever. Like, this is what I actually believe. I think that the actual physical makeup of the Earth is something that I just don't know. Like, I just don't. Like, I don't know where I subscribe to in this, because I mean, frankly, I just lack all of the experience and information, to really make that call. And you brought up great points in the past, just about how there's a high degree of water saturation permeating the planet. It goes way deeper than we thought. We know that scientifically, that's proven, and that's true. We subscribe to this whole, the crust is the crust, and then it liquefies into a gel state before its liquid mantle, and then it goes into like the outer core and the inner core, and there's a phase difference because of the pressure differences. Well, they say the pressure differences, that might be true, but what do we talk about all the time? Why the core would be solid, but not everything surrounding it? Well, yeah, there's a temperature differential, right, in your null zone at the dead center. I mean, so I think that kind of goes without saying that that's a thing, but it's again, it's all real interesting stuff. And then we see these voids and caverns and things that go deep into the earth, and you don't even know where they stop. They just become unexplorable at certain points, even with like instruments and stuff that aren't people. We don't know how extensive they are. We don't even know what lies beneath them necessarily. And then all of the technology type stuff, like, when they run resonance tests and stuff, they get an earthquake here, they can feel it somewhere else, and then they could do their math equations to try and figure out what lies between and whatnot. Like, uh, and any instrument that's just trying to like measure, through the earth or whatever, I don't trust any of that stuff as being super accurate. So, and even then, what's the resolution on it? If you got to zoom that far out to get your reading, right? What's the resolution on it? Are you going to see pockets that are the size of a city? Probably not. So
it goes also into the light body, Joe.
sure.
So what if the whole goal of inner Earth is to achieve their light body and then be recycled back into the upper Earth as a person again? What if they're just light bodies down there, that they're not not people like us, but they're people who have transcended already, who's already lived a life on the surface and then wiped clean and came back down and had all their memories restored, and they're in a light body state. I mean, I'm not trying to go against religion here, so please don't get me wrong. I'm just saying there could be a recycling in the earth itself that all the souls that are in it at the time, if they pass, that their souls put back into the earth itself.
I mean, maybe something like that's is the case. And what I find interesting out of that is, like, again, it's like a little deductive reasoning. Really, like the whole idea of hell being like this fiery place underground and everything like that was not a biblical like type of description. That came out of like Dante's Inferno and stuff. And the same time that those types of texts were written, was the same exact time where they were changing all sorts of theology to more align with kind of keeping some of the more traditional and ritualistic aspects of the theology occulted to the higher orders. So in all, so when you think that, like, oh, okay, well, if you were bad, you went to hell, and hell is this place underground where it's all fiery, and this is what you kind of have in your mind, maybe the whole idea is just the opposite of that. It could well be. But I don't know, like, if there's anything that I do kind of believe out of it is, like, this is probably a prison planet. We've kind of brought that up before. I do think that this is sort of a prison planet for souls to kind of experience things, but once you sign up for that experience, it tends to be like getting out of here tends to be difficult. And you kind of got to check all the boxes and have the full spectrum of enlightenment before you could be free of it again, because that's your sole purpose. Like, I kind of feel like that's the case. So the chances are, like, unless if you have unfinished business, you do want to be able to transcend, right? But if you have unfinished business, maybe you do just get stuck here and party until it's your time again, right?
Wow. Yeah, that'd be bad. We are all signing contracts to get up here to Earth, right? And you go, yeah, I'll remember to do that. Yeah, I'll remember to do this part. Yeah, I'll figure that out when I get up there, right? Have that attitude, and then you get up here and you have no idea what you're supposed to be doing, and you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as somebody who's kind of had it all ways in his life, I'll tell you that, the struggle is sometimes, like, it may not feel good. It may not be the best part. Like some people say, like, well, the journey's the best part. And listen, the journey isn't always the best part, so it can be, but like, it's not always. But, without the struggling that we undergo, it really doesn't make the things that are like, that's what makes the things that are good worthwhile is that struggle. Like when you could snap things into existence, or just like never have a hard time, never have to worry about a hard time or anything like that. Like those are objectively good times. They get boring very fast, and like a free soul that's free of a body is probably in that sort of state, where, oh, this is great, but I have nothing to measure it against, so it's just blasé. So you almost come to Earth to be able to feel the suffer, to be able to feel the joy again.
Like those hurting moments that really suck in your life, and it's fun to look back on them and say I learned something. But if you ask me, do I want to go through it again? I am like kicking and screaming, saying no.
Yeah, it's true. But as people like right here on the surface, we often get desensitized to the great things around us, and that's when it becomes time for you to really inflect into yourself and like realize, like, what do I need, what don't I need, and what do I need to be able to feel again, because like that's just a terrible place to be.
Well, it goes back to the light body. You can't achieve those things without giving up everything, without
Pretty
letting things go, and to re-achieve what you had before in that cycle, you have to be able to do it again.
Yeah, it's a full on ego death. That's kind of got to be the way.
Man, that's crazy. So, what if when you get sucked into the big hole of the earth and you get recycled? What if you end up on different levels? Like, there's like several different layers of the earth. Yeah, maybe there might be a Dante's Inferno level. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I got off on the wrong elevator here, buddy.
Yeah, right. I mean, listen, maybe that is the case, but at the same time, who's to say that they don't take those shit bags and send them to the surface? Because I take a good look around and I'm like, where did you come from?
I shoot you right out the devil's butthole back to the surface.
Yeah. For real.
Oh, man.
Right, they get exiled like we did. That's it. We become politicians.
There you go. That's probably what they do. Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's crazy. Inner Earth, man. Like, if it really was something that you could live for 5,000 years instead of, potentially 100 years on the surface, would you go there before you would want to go to heaven?
I don't know, man. Heaven sounds like a pretty good place.
Would you want your journey in the body to be over, or any part of your soul, your body? Now, I'm not saying you don't have those things in heaven. I'm just saying, would you want to continue the journey in your own body if it lasted longer?
Well, I think that when you talk about like a lot of this, more new age spiritual stuff that people follow and whatnot, that tends to be one of the talking points that comes up all the time, which is, if you free your soul, who's to say your soul doesn't want to come back? Like, a lot of times what keeps you in the cycle is just the soul's own desire to continue experiencing. And it can only really live vicariously, so to speak, in its etheric state. So, it gets tired of that. It wants to feel again, and for that reason, it would, potentially come back. And that's sort of one of those things where, there's really no solid answer on it. And you could almost understand just the psychology of it too, based on what I was saying before. Like, yeah, it's wonderful, it's great, but when everything's wonderful and great, what's the baseline there?
Yeah. Well,
So
I would think that if you got to heaven, you learned everything instantly. But if you gave me 5,000 more years on the earth, how much more joy would I get from learning it myself? Going through that trial, going through those hardships, going through the things, learning it, learning every aspect of it. Now, it'd be nice to have all the information at once. I guess it really depends on what kind of person you are, but I would prefer staying on the earth a little longer. You know what I mean? I want to see the cycles of life progress at every 100 years and how it's changed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, if humans ever got to the place, both mentally, spiritually, evolutionally, societally, and all the boxes are kind of checked off, then at that point you would have kind of a heaven on earth scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't that be the ideal circumstance, where there's struggle, but the struggle ain't too much, and there's experience, but the experience is more joyful than painful, and that all these negatives are really only just fed in manageable small doses that is never enough to destroy you, so you don't fear them, but at the same time they're present just to keep things in balance and check, and you get to have a body and live that way. And that sounds very, like the most amazing thing in the world, very utopian, at that point. Is it reality? Right now it's certainly not. Right now it's not. It's certainly not. We got plenty of baseline of suffering to gauge our joy against. So, like, and nobody is exempt from that. Nobody. And in fact, I'll go out on a limb and I'll say the less that you're enduring as over a long period of time, the harder it's going to be when you have to endure. And usually, like, I mean, I hate to say this, and it's an awful situation, but look at, like, P. Diddy in that situation. Guy was living the high life for decades, doing anything he wants, the most despicable things, the most decadent things. No, did not ever cross his mind. Or I shouldn't do this did not cross his mind. I think the guy went and firebombed somebody's car because he was pissed off. No, does not cross his mind. He does as he pleases. He does as he will. And he was entirely immune to it that entire time. And then all of a sudden, when the house of cards comes to fall, it falls. And when it falls hard. That guy ain't never coming out of jail.
No.
He ain't never coming out of jail. And they'll be lucky if they don't hook him up to a cooker, And honestly, they probably should hook him up to a cooker. I mean, listen, he made some good music back in the day, but like, all bets aside, the guy's an awful human being. He's going to pay for what he did.
Well, my stance has always been on if you take a life, you deserve in the cooker. That's it. If you caused somebody's death, or you just created a life of suffering for everyone around you, and that's number, especially in the number he's talking about. I'm sorry, there's no rehabilitation necessary there. You know what I mean? There's a couple dollar solution that makes it easier. So
I mean, listen, killing somebody is awful, but I'll tell you, there's things you could do to people if you're bad enough of a person that make murder look like like a parking ticket.
Oh, I agree. And unfortunately, we see that,
because you know what, you kill somebody, like, they might have suffered, they might be gone, they might have caused hurt to the family, this, that, the other thing, but guess what? They got cut short of you screwing them any longer. There's suffering you could put on people that have just ruined their life forever and have them deal with that forever, and just things that and like, honestly, you got to gauge the crime, man. It's bad.
Maybe we just put him in a cell with El Chapo and give him some baby oil and let's see how it works out.
Oh, yeah.
It's bad either way. Let's just see the way it works out. Maybe we'll take bets on it. I don't know. That sounds bad. I apologize.
Listen, I'm sure there's some inmates that are looking forward to his pretty behind. That's all. Yeah. If he thought he liked it because he was in control, he about to not like it because he ain't in control.
Oh man, it's only worth a pack of cigarettes. That's okay. Oh, anyway, let's get back to our topic, man. Inner Earth, not inner Diddy.
No Diddy.
No Diddy. Oh man, that'd be horrible. I mean, think about that scenario, just like you said. But you're in inner Earth, and you're going to live 5,000 years, and That kind of thing's going on. It's like being eaten by a shark in Groundhog Day every day. You know what I mean? Like that scenario would really suck.
Yeah, there's people that say that whatever forces are down there, right? Um, Sentient forces, whether physical or non, okay, have influence over the surface of the earth. And we talk about things all the time like resonance chambers and throwing certain areas in or out of frequency. And we know how the frequency affects the entire environment around it. Well, there's people out there that firmly believe that there's certain places on this earth where that it could resonate in such a way that has a negative or positive effect on that particular area, and people that go into it and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like certain areas dogs won't go around. You know what I mean? They know something bad's going on there, and they just start freaking out. So
And
yeah.
now, no matter what causes that I believe that and that's no matter what causes that, whether it's a natural process, whether it's something more like what we're talking about here. There's definitely areas that just have better vibes than others, man, and that's just the way it goes.
They're hearing different frequencies than us. Like that dog whistle, I can't hear that. Well, I can't hear anything, but you couldn't hear it. So
I was gonna say I don't think I could hear a dog whistle either. So
yeah, so that might just be it. They're hearing different frequencies than we do, and they don't like certain ones at all. That could just be what it is. Maybe if we looked at everything through the lens of frequency as a map around the entire Earth, maybe our whole perception of what's really going on would completely change.
Yeah, well, I know that they particularly don't care for the one where we're like testing H-bombs. Whatever frequency that is, seems to piss off everybody above and below.
That would piss off me too. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah.
Imagine that, man. They go around over your facility there where you got this big bomb, right? And every day you go to work knowing there's a big bomb in there. And then some UFO just goes over and clowns you and starts touching your dials and turning them on and off, right? And you're tripping balls at that point, man. You got to be like coming out of your seat, like, what the hell's going on here?
I mean, I find it shocking that all those nuclear deactivation events and stuff like that weren't like kept up more lock and key as far as like being classified and quiet is concerned. Because if there's any sort of like conspiratorial type of thing that you might want to keep under wraps, it'd be something like that. Like that's just my opinion of it. So how something like that is like out there widely known and accepted that these phenomena have deactivated our nukes and stuff like that. I have no idea how that one slipped.
Yeah.
No idea. Yeah.
Well, it's probably like a challenge, like you can't do it. You know what I mean? We know you can't, right? Or we already protected our ass so we don't get screwed by that. But
yeah,
I wouldn't put it out there.
It could be saying the quiet part out loud, We're like, well, no, our nukes never got deactivated, but they did because we figured out how to do it and we tested it and it works. So we're just sitting there saying, you know what the UFOs did, right?
Yeah.
The UFOs deactivated our nukes, like all of them. We had to fix it. So that's one way to call across the sea.
So basically, when our Skunk Works plane arrives in your area, we're turning your stuff off.
Yeah. I think that there's so much more to it than we know. And I think that history is going to play out in a way that we're going to figure that we're not the only ones that know it either. And you'll see that with the relationships that are ultimately developed and stuff, because it becomes like a world joke at a certain point in time. If every nation across knew the things that we had, right, it couldn't be a secret. Okay. And the power dynamic would just not, it would cease to exist, right? Yeah, we know this power dynamic exists. So the handful of countries that do know about it, it's like, you never want the word of it to get out. And it almost becomes like, the jokes in it between those countries, because they know that there's almost no threat between them, because of just the nature of it all. And I think that's more, that's super interesting. I mean, and did this technology come from the center of the earth? Like, after World War II, did somebody develop this stuff, or has it been around since the time of the pyramids, 10, 12, 50,000 years ago, however long ago they were built? We don't even know how old the pyramids are.
Yeah.
Did the pyramids connect to some kind of under earth circumstance? If not directly, did they? Was that what the Ankh is for? So you portal yourself, with an Ankh from the surface of the earth to under earth, or from pyramid to under earth. Was that how they got around?
Oh, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? That's your portal.
Well, I wouldn't. I think that our ability to, if this is the case, right? I think that our ability to go there, so to speak, ended at that point, right? Because it's not in any sort of recorded history. It's not in recorded history. So it ended at that point. And we know that could very well have been the mechanism to connect all these things.
Well, maybe, removing that Ark of the Covenant caused everything to get destroyed up here. And maybe this really was, the Garden of Eden up here while it was in place, and all the pyramids are running correctly, and we can go between, inner earth, outer earth, however you want to see it. And then we screwed up somehow, and we let some moron talk for us, and then we ended up in this situation. I mean, it's like when we look at all the different countries and they say eventually we're going to become like one earth together, one country. And then I look at all the ones that connect together, they come up with the stupidest laws ever. And they start arresting people for speech and things like that, and memes. And it's like going back down to the Middle Ages, and they can't see that they're falling. They think that they're trying to rise above, and they're not. They're swirling in the toilet bowl and going down. And I think somehow it's like a joke to the people on inner earth. They're like, let's put the stupidest people in the positions of the most power and see if they can overcome it. And
all right, so let me build on this.
Okay.
And I'm going to bring some of my own just wisdom into it. So what if the fruit of the forbidden knowledge was the idea of taking advantage of somebody? Because if you think about it, right, if you have a society that works in that type of, system of abundance and kind of have whatever you want and whatnot, who's to say that, the idea of taking advantage of somebody and having more was not the forbidden knowledge in the first place? Because then what that does is it takes, an entire society of people who are existing in a state of equilibrium, right? And then it creates a power structure. And then once you start exploiting that power structure, next thing you know, the greed comes in, and all the sins come in at that point. So your equilibrium is broke. It becomes incompatible with a society that needs that equilibrium to exist. And once things are thrown out of balance and you try to monetize everything, so to speak, right, and it just creates these class structures that ultimately make the whole thing fall apart. And then once you have the class structures, it's not just about how much you could buy or something like that. It becomes a ruler and a serf relationship, right? So now all of a sudden, you're all men are created equal, becomes no longer the case.
Yeah, that's horrifying, Joe.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because it just follows the pattern of what these morons keep doing. So, and it keeps getting worse. I mean, you think they'd learn all the killing, everything like that, but I guess if you say a bad tweet is like the Holocaust, I guess that's the kind of level of intelligence we're dealing with here. then yeah, you know what I mean? We're going to get stupid answers because we're playing a stupid game. You know what I mean? We're in stupid prizes. So,
Yep, pretty much.
anyway,
At that point, everybody just disappears to the center of the earth that was capable of maintaining that equilibrium, and then just let the surface go to hell in a handbasket.
Where we get the Great Flood again.
Yeah, but right. You get the Great Flood, then all of a sudden everything is scarce. Where you had all abundance before, where it really didn't matter because there was enough to go around, right? Now all of a sudden there's scarcity, and with that scarcity breeds that whole power struggle situation that exists. And but some people are more capable of navigating it than others, and the reality of it is that any individual's charity or any large group's charity can only go so far.
Yeah, see, like you were saying, but we got to overcome the struggle within us to become a more advanced civilization. Maybe that's kind of like some of the space things that you hear about, like aliens don't want nothing to do with us right now because we're a bunch of savage morons, and it's a bad combination. Maybe that's the same thing. We can't get into some galactic party because we're ruthless rednecks with beer, and maybe we need to fix that before we're allowed in.
Maybe. I mean, but I'll be honest, being being like just a redneck drinking a beer on like an ATV doing some reckless crap, like don't knock it till you tried.
It's like taking the backhoe out by the pond, and then you have the rope attached to it, and they fling you out to the water.
Yeah,
or the big slide.
I was thinking about more like putting a tarp in the back of your pickup truck and putting the garden hose in it, and driving around the neighborhood. Whatever floats your boat, whatever.
That sounds bad, but it sounds just like my family, man. They always try stupid things like that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, always got some ridiculous podunk shit going on.
Oh man, that's terrible. Just to tell you, man, when I was a kid, I took my little Chevy S10, the little square body one, and I wanted to lift it. So I went down, I took my rims, I put 35-inch tires on them, right? Monster tires for that little truck. So
That's
then
hilarious.
I need to lift it, right? So I go, well, I'm too poor to afford the suspension lift. So then I literally went and took a flagpole that I had there and chopped it up for 6-inch spacers. So I put it right between the body and the frame. So my gear shifter went from up here to way down here, right? And my whole radiator and everything was hanging out. It was a sight to see, man. There was 35s on a little S10, which was cool, but it was done a complete redneck way, man. Like I didn't even get the whole back of the truck half on for about another week.
That's funny, right? The magic of hockey pucks and duct tape, huh? You go down to the hardware store. It's like, yeah, look, how many do I need? 4, 8, 6, 16 stainless steel. How long do you need them? I don't know, a foot.
Dude, it was the biggest redneck thing.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the opposite of what people usually do with them, because usually they'll slam an S10 to the ground because that's where it belongs. If you were going to lift something ridiculous, you went with a Blazer usually. You know?
Well, couldn't afford a Blazer.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, not only that, it was my work vehicle, so I had to drive that thing to work, so everybody got a good laugh when I pulled up. And then I had to cut all the fender wells to get the tires so they wouldn't rub every 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's funny. I was going to say, man, like 35s are pretty big. Like, I mean, today trucks are so big, though. You put, 35s and nothing on them.
Yeah.
You really don't have to touch anything until you almost go to 40 inches, which if you put 40-inch tires on, you got a monster truck at that point. But nonetheless, 35s on an S10 is literally hilarious, especially the square body ones, man, because those things were like, it was like a compact car pickup truck.
Yeah, they were small. I
Yeah,
didn't think
only thing
about
I
the
can
little
think about smaller than
4-cylinder in
that.
there.
You remember the Rampages? It was what was it, a Dodge Rampage? It
Okay.
was basically what was it? It was like a K car, right? It was like kind of related to like a Charger or Daytona at the time, but it predated the Daytonas.
Okay.
Regardless, but it was a two-seat car, K car, with a pickup bed in the back.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
nice.
the only thing smaller than an S10.
Like the precursor to a Ranchero, or the cross between like a Pinto and a Ranchero.
Yeah, but they were kind of like bigger. Like this thing was like a compact car. It was like tiny.
Huh.
Yeah. Anyway,
Oh
yeah,
man.
redneck stuff. Yeah. So yeah, rednecks are gonna invade inner Earth. It's gonna be funny. Make get like an old bulldozer, like a big auger in the front, and be like, "We're coming in."
I don't know, man. There's no peace within there. That party never ends. Let me tell you that from experience.
Yep, that's true.
You ever get stuck in the cycle where the party goes on for 3 days and you didn't realize how many days it was? And yeah, that's a whole nother
No, I,
story.
I never got stuck in that cycle, man. I got married when I was 23 years old, so like, my partying days were pretty damn short lived.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, don't get in that cycle then if you've been there. Or if you haven't been there, don't go there.
Oh no, I'm too old for that crap. Go to bed by like 9:30. Don't work tomorrow.
Well, I couldn't do it these days, man. Like partying for me is like you get 30 minutes at the barbecue if you're lucky. Because past when I'm done cooking, man, you better have all your conversations wrapped up because I'm about done.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I could eat myself into a food coma before I get so like drunk that I'm like blackout drunk.
Well, that's
So,
what I mean.
right,
Yeah.
right. I'll eat
So
myself right into a food coma and be like, I'm good, I'm fine.
now I guess you should preference that by saying you may have a 6-pack or so. You know what I mean? While you're cooking, that's the normal thing. The stories, the drinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's how it goes, man. Oh, that's the best time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
got the
back to the inner Earth thing real quick
okay.
before I forget entirely. So, I brought this book up a couple of times, and I'm not going to go super far into it. I feel like it's one of those things that if somebody's into the whole inner Earth thing and just wants to like read a fantastic book that transcends just what's underneath the surface of the Earth, this is a good one. There's Etidorhpa. It is by John Uri Lloyd. Read this book 2.5 times.
Hmm.
2 times, and then skimmed through it a couple other times just for like the little, nuggets. Because believe it or not, this is all reference for physics too, which is just crazy to think, and also like reference for psychology, which is crazy to think. And it's like a pretty occulted book that used to have a huge following turn of last century. So it was written in like I want to say off the top of my head like 1892. It was published in 1892, and written before that. So it goes to show how old it is and how much they knew. But the premise of the story is more or less that there was a guy that was going to spill the secrets of a secret organization, and when they found out that this is what he was going to do, they basically kidnapped him and sent him on a journey into the inside of the earth to really, because he thought he knew the secrets of the secret organization, but because he never experienced it, he really didn't have a full understanding to any degree of what he was going to spill. So what the secret organization told him is you could go and experience it, and once you experience it and you know it within, then you could go and you could actually speak of the secret, because at that point you've experienced it. But until you've experienced it, really you're just parroting what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's sort of the premise of it, right? And when they kidnap him and send him on this journey, right? The journey is into the center of the earth. And the things that happen in the center of the earth and all the physics aspects of it and the craziness that, and all just so relevant. It kind of coalesces with him kind of falling and falling and falling until he could fall no more. He falls in this hole in states of suspension for like dozens of pages.
Oh, wow.
Which is crazy to think. And this is after the big mushrooms and the weird people and the people that were stuck down there, like people with vices and stuff like that. They were like not harmful, and like his guide told him, because he had a guide, he's like, listen, they're not here to hurt you, but they're scary. And this is how they were when they were living on the surface. So it was kind of like a pseudo form hell, where like these people just turned into the epitomized version of their sins, more or less.
Wow.
Like at one point it was crazy. And there was this whole part with like a boat, and he's like, well, I mean, is the boat moving? He's like, oh, we're moving. He's like, we're going like 700 or 800 miles per hour. He's like, but there's no wind. And then he goes into the whole explaining it, and it was like a charge force and all this stuff. Yeah, really, really crazy stuff. But he falls and falls and falls until he could fall no more, see his reflection, and come back out the top. And comes back out the top, totally dead and more alive than he's ever been. So his body was left behind, but his spirit was totally enlightened, and his spirit lived on to tell the tale. And he was guaranteed eternal life from falling in the hole, and he was granted that eternal life to be able to get his word out. So at that point, it brings it to the forward of the story, which was he had to seek somebody out that had enough knowledge to be able to actually write down his manuscript and get his word out. And then that was how the book came to be. Yeah. It was super, super interesting stuff, but it's all about center of the earth, or not center, but beneath the surface of the earth. And I think that it's really worth a read for anybody in the group. And if you don't want to read it, pretty sure that, and this isn't even this book, this is a total reproduction copy, like knockoff, because it's over 100 years old, so there's no copyright on it. This book was $100. Okay. So like if you don't want to spend $100 and have a hard copy of it, you could go and listen to it on YouTube, and it makes good background noise and stuff, and it's just super interesting. And some of the YouTube readings, I think, even have some of the photos and stuff, because they have good illustrations and whatnot in here too of some of the stuff that was going on.
That's cool, man. That's like a whole journey in itself.
Yeah, for sure. And if, like, again, I told you, I don't know what I believe what's under the Earth's surface. But one thing I can say is that if there was something going on under there, it's probably more akin to this than anything else, because this book sums it up in a very plausible way and ties it to things that we generally accept as true. So, again, it's worth a read. It's way too much to go into, more than I already have. But,
So let's go into the woo a little bit, okay?
Woo! We haven't already?
Well, we'll go a little deeper.
Oh boy!
So we look at Mars. Was it habitable? Could it be where these beings came from? The asteroid belt, was there once a planet there? You see, planetary physics always tells us no, but then again, if planets are hollow in the center, they wouldn't understand any of this. And then if half of the planets that was there got destroyed and sent to other planets, and was a meteor shower everywhere so many millions of years ago, there, there wouldn't be evidence that there was enough mass there to create a planet. So could have been one of those civilization. Mr. Mars was talking about it with the asteroid belt, and there being a planet there. There was like a water world, and they gave technology to Mars, and Mars screwed it up, and a bunch of arrogant beeholes, and they gave the same thing to Earth, and then they screwed it up, and then in the end they just went back to the center of the earth, you know what I mean, and stayed there. So could it be any of that?
I mean, I'm a conversationalist, man, and I'll talk about anything, but I don't know what more I would have to say on that subject beyond that speculation. I listen, if something like that did happen, I mean, hey, so be it. Like, then that's exactly how it went down, what it went down. Could something like that have happened? Sure. The history of our planet is widely unknown. We can't accurately even say what happened 500 years ago because most of it is just simply lost. We look back into our own records that we have from thousands of years ago, and even when it's there, we really can't properly decipher this stuff, within reason, right? So, who's to say anything that happened before like 10,000 years ago is just anybody's guess? It's a super wildly lost history. And I think that if you were to look at anything even somewhat contemporary to try and substantiate something like that, I think that it does exist, okay? But it exists in the form of, our understanding of astrology as it's progressed through time. Because now one thing that we do know is that our ancestors were extremely accurate when it came to mapping the skies, right? And that there have been, fundamental differences between, ancient, and I'm talking ancient, star charts and modern star charts that does suggest that there could have been a different order to the planets at certain other periods of time in our written history. Which is good because guess what? Before the written history, we don't have anything to go by, really. The tree, like even like things that you would usually use, like trees and stuff like that, to determine different forces at work, so to speak, or weather patterns, or gravitational effects, things of this nature. Like that stuff doesn't exist really in any wide variety in a pure form beyond our written record. It all ends at the same point. So, because you could see the change in the star chart, to think that there was a different order to things or a different way that things were in the heavens at some other point in time fairly recently, I think that there's speculative evidence to that. I know that it's been postulated a bunch of times that the standing man, the hourglass guy with the head, the arms, and it's like this, right? It's like the bell shape. And then they say that that's consistent with, toroidal plasmatic forces, right? And how if you were to look at it as like a cross section, of like a plasma discharge, how it would actually make the same exact shape, that would obviously be a manifest of having a large object close to us where there's that type of offset connection from our own magnetic field, right?
Yeah,
That's something that ties right into what we talk about all the time. So there's things that do exist that point to a different order at some point in time, but what was of that order, and what life on Mars, and then some kind of transitional colony or something here, and your guess is as good as mine because we just don't know. I think that the pyramids are really, when you look at the hourglass guy with the plasma, and then you look at the pyramids and the Ankh, I think that that's the biggest connection that we could make to help try and speculate on this subject, because I truly do feel that whole Ankh and portal and situation, that if there was any way to go from point A to point B, Earth to inner Earth to surface, that, I think that's it.
Yeah, it was the author was Jim Mars, by the way. But that whole Ankh thing. So I watched the show and they were talking about plasma, and for the life of me, I don't understand this, and it may be just the never having the stuff work with it or come near it. They don't understand it. They're not looking for the plasma. They always say, we're looking for the plasma, because then science has told them plasma's everywhere, right? And man, I've created all kinds of plasma, whether it be, visible plasma, invisible plasma, any type. It's all bad for the human body. It all creates nerve damage. So when they started talking about the onc and, plasma, and I'm going, no. The onc is resonance, and it always has been and always will be. They're looking to drop out the plasma because the plasma is simply a carrier for resonance. So they're looking for the pure resonance. They're looking for the frequency to get in your body. It's no different than like my headset. If I put on the tune in each ear and try to resonate it inside there, well, I'm going through an interpretation zone through my ears, which is bad. I need to get the pure frequency into the body. Okay, so I need to absorb it in some way. So I don't think that they quite made the connection the right way. So that's my thought on it anyway. I saw like an hour and a half show on it, and people write books on it, and it's like, I wish you would have created it first, because everybody says, oh, plasma's everywhere. No, it's really not. Frequency is.
No, yeah, plasma is really only manifested the points that we typically discuss. It has to do with the power density levels and the spacing and everything like that. It appears as a layer in a gradient of things, and I mean, yeah, it could be isolated and stuff like that in compressed states, but
yeah, I mean,
it's not everywhere. That's the energy is everywhere. The frequency is everywhere, like you said.
Well, if you said you trapped frequency in layers of plasma, then you'd be accurate. If you say that you cannot see the plasma and the frequency is still in there, that's also accurate. But the fact that they say plasma is everywhere, I don't buy it. It's the wrong word. It's not. It's probably not the wrong description in the way they describe it. It's the wrong word.
That's fair. We've discussed before how a plasmatic force is kind of like the life force. So, without going too deep down a rabbit hole on it, but it becomes kind of relevant, right? If you have, your brain and your central nervous system, which was developed from your specific DNA, right? From your specific DNA, there's some kind of coding in there that basically would hold your brain and your central nervous system and your body into resonance with your plasmatic life force, right? So that's what keeps things attached. Now, there could be differentiations between it, and that's when your body goes into states of dis-ease, right? Which is an interesting thing, and that's sometimes life ending, right? Point I'm trying to make is that if the whole point is to bring your body and your plasmatic life force into some kind of equilibrium resonance that's not native to it, but native to something to bring you from point A to point B, I mean, maybe that's where it's at. Maybe that's the case.
Well, plasma is supposed to be like a physical state of matter, right? In most instances,
well, it is and it isn't. Yeah, it's. I always like to describe it as matter like energy, right? Matter like energy.
Okay, so I always saw the light body as light energy, like physical light. You know what I mean? Manifesting as energy. Okay, and then I see plasma as a state of matter that has energy. So I kind of see them differently. So when you say light body, I start automatically think something totally different. But I'm not thinking in a plasma state where it's matter. And you would have to remove all the matter from that plasma, but then it's no longer plasma.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and that's not fundamentally wrong, except for the the direct correlation with now. So you think of like the plasmatic life force as like a form of quintessence, and a form of quintessence is no different than the aether. Ether is quintessence. So,
Okay.
um, it's materially the same as the ambient, except it's got a separate locality because of its density, right? So I don't know. I mean, I feel like what I'm saying is similar to what you're saying, and I want to make sure that we're kind of not missing words. But plasma is manifest, as plasma when the energy interacts with the matter, but it doesn't cease to be energy once it's no longer directly attached to the matter.
Okay.
Right.
So
So
let's
then it becomes a form of quintessence, and that's what spirit is, right?
let's look at it in a different way. Say it's a ghostly form. The
Mhm.
ghostly form normally cannot interact with you, but will show up as light in the room. And it'll move, it'll do everything, but it's not exactly acting with its environment. The window may be open, but did you see him open it? Did you see the ghost open that? So it only interacts with things like say your old school TV or tube TV, right? Because it's like the voltage in there that gets in there that activates the screen, so it's able to communicate in any way possible, right? But to me, plasma state would be it takes that body that it's in that ghostly form, and then it's able to move matter in the room. Now, could that be a concentration of the light going into the plasma state? That could be where I'm missing it. You know what I mean? Could that be
I think that
possible?
is because I mean where I'm coming from is like an ice cube being thrown into a sea of water, right? It's all water, okay, but the ice cube has different attributes about it that keeps it an ice cube until it dissipates. Potentially, maybe under the right conditions, right, the ice wouldn't melt, you see. But in other situations, the ice would melt and become one with the ambience of the environment, right? But in other circumstances, that ice cube could exist indefinitely in a sea of ambience, and be the same as the ambience in just a higher density state. So, and that tends to be the kind of the difference, right? So once there's a disattachment of a plasmatic life force, it just becomes a higher density of the ambient energies.
I always dislike the thing about the ice cube and water. Look at our oceans. There's two oceans that come together, and there's a clear line between them because the density of the salt water in them.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they're both water. No, they don't agree with each other. If you have salt water and fresh water, they're going to divide. I mean,
So that's
yeah, there's
the
a little
other
bit more
example
to it.
exactly too. Right. That's another example too. That's very similar in circumstance. Mhm.
So, yeah, that maybe it's just me and how I see plasma, and because I see it built and I see it taken down. I can tell you this: if you get to a plasma state, it's absolutely harmful. So, when I do the experiment and I put the energy in the mud, do you know why it's not in the plasma state anymore? It's not forming the plasma state because the actual grounding of the electricity pulls that out and allows the frequency to become free from it. So
Yeah.
that when you touch it, you're getting the frequency. You're not getting the plasma state. It's a separation of them.
So if you want to take it to the craziest next level of it, right? Malcolm Bendel um had a took his own blood and had plasmoids put into the blood, like the same as the thunderstorm generator creates, and then had that transfused into it. He transfused plasmoids to
Okay.
bring his whole being into resonance.
Yeah, I don't want to go into that or touch that any further.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I wasn't going further. I'm not saying whether this is a good or a bad thing. I'm not saying whatever. For all I know, he did that sort of thing recreationally. Just
yeah.
saying that, he seems to think that there's significance in that. I could understand the principle of where he's going. I just don't know that that's the way to achieve it.
Why would you want to do that? That's people and their destructive energy drives me nuts. I don't know why they just don't understand this point.
Well, it's a transmuting plasmoid in condensed form. So,
No, I know what it is. Anytime you create a plasmoid, it's a destructive energy. They're not constructive. So it's something that went wrong in the system that created an energy inside of a bubble. That's all that it is. So what you want is frequency. You do not want the destructive nature of energy. So why you would have any of that next to you? And it goes to working with this stuff for quite a while. I can tell you as soon as something turns on whether the energy's bad or good or what's going on with it just by how you react in that situation.
yeah, sure.
I mean,
I would
it's
say
physical reactions.
right. I would say that it's a subtle energy sensitivity, but it's not subtle. That's the
No,
thing.
it's not. No,
Right. It's
if
not
you
subtle energy. That's
no,
real.
yeah,
Yeah.
you've been in this for a while, Joe. You'll get the arthritis in your hands. You get everything. Okay, that's absolutely destructive energy. So when you get the constructive energy, there is no arthritis. It doesn't exist. Okay,
Right.
and that makes you wonder too with the inner earth that they really understand the constructive part, because a lot of people work on the deconstructive part and they think it's the greatest thing on God's green earth, and it's the absolute worst thing for you. You want to run a Tesla coil at 400 volts? I don't want to be in the room. I don't. Matter of fact, I don't want to be in the next room. You know what? You take that stuff a mile down the road and you run that stuff there. You leave me alone. Okay? I don't want to be anywhere near it because I know you don't know what you're working with. Okay? So you want to change the configuration of that and get rid of the destructive part? I'm all in because I know exactly what it does. So yeah, a lot of people out there just think, oh, well, it's cold plasma. No. I mean, look at the plasma channel. You went and grew plants, right? And you're saying, oh, this is great. Why don't I just increase the amount of plasma going into it? Well, because it kills your plants. And it was very clear in his whole episode of what he did, it killed his plants. Okay? But he also ran it in the air. Why would you do that? Run it into that dirt. Get it to take away the voltage and the amperage. Get it to get to that resonance state, because you ultimately want frequency to determine the growth of your plant. It isn't the other parts of it. Those parts are destructive. So, sorry,
Well,
going off on a rant.
So the Earth's own layers, they run off of the same principles, right? So the closer to the surface you are, the more likely there is to be decomposition, the breaking down of organic matter and even inorganic matter as well through different natural processes, right? But the deeper in you get, the more refined and pure the material, to the point where if you were to suppose that the mantle is some type of more homogeneous material, right? That's all fresh material coming up in a constructive manner when it crystallizes and forms into new rock formation, right? It's doing so in resonance with the rest of the earth, and how the different materials ultimately crystallize and precipitate out, okay, is going to depend on the frequencies involved, right? So it is a constructive, when you're going further in, it is a constructive force that's coming from below, and a deconstructive force coming from above, and that has to do with all the phase differences that occur through the layers of the earth and the atmosphere, right? Because as you know, the earth is a hydrogen trap, right?
Yeah.
So right, so everything is trying to capture hydrogen out while all the energy that's pouring down on us is trying to steal the hydrogen back. And it's just stuck in a cycle of, hydrogen depletion and then accumulation and precipitation and so on and so forth. But that's what the Earth is a hydrogen trap.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's transmutation, and all you need to understand is which part you want to pull apart. Everybody says, well, maybe you might want to pull hydrogen from it. No, hydrogen is the attachment. You want to pull the main source apart. So if it's oxygen, then the oxygen is the one you want to pull apart. The hydrogen will then pair up. See, it's a succubus compared to the other one. The other one gives you the structure. So it's like building crystals. There's not much difference in there. You're setting the structure with oxygen. You want to go into making more energy with the water car or something like that. You're dealing straight with the oxygen. Who says you even need the hydrogen? Maybe just the explosive force of separation is enough to run that machine. Maybe it's not what you really think it is. It's easy to get the easy answer. It's harder to dig in further and get the better answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, oxygen's just an extremely interesting thing because it's hyper reactive, right? So because it's hyper reactive, it really needs to be paired up with something to be effective in terms of energy creation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where all the oxidation reactions really come from, and that's why a lot of them are so exothermic, is because any time that oxygen is going to combine into something new, it's going to let off a lot of energy, right? But the fact is that if you took oxygen in just a vacuum and all it is oxygen, I don't know that it's reactive with itself. And in like not necessarily an exothermic way, at least. Like you could make different forms of oxygen, but I don't think that it's exothermically reaction to the point where it's an oxidation reaction, right? So you need that second element for it to have the interaction. So I think that it's not just one; it is kind of both. But it's the breaking and pairing and repairing and breaking and that cycle that you could go through with it that makes it so effective. When you're talking about hydrogen and water.
Yeah, well, it's no different than a hot air balloon, right?
No.
Go up there, burn out all the stuff, burn out all the oxygen inside the balloon, and then get to a state where there isn't any, so therefore it becomes lighter. And, yeah, you just kind of float up, and kind of crazy that anything that comes with like the UFO technology kind of works the same way, doesn't it? I mean,
so at what point in the center of the Earth does your buoyancy play a role? So, like, I know that's a silly way to put it, maybe, I guess, but gravity obviously holds things to the surface, right? So as you know from the gravitron and the centrifugal forces that apply, right? The closer you get to the center, the less the force is exerted. If you're a certain density, right? And let's just say, as just an example, you're buried in sand, right? And the sand is just covering you up. At what stage do you float in the sand? See, the sand will hold you down because the force of the sand against you is enough to keep you pinned, right? But there's got to come a certain point in time where, because you're less dense than the sand, that you would float. It would have to be the case. So at what point does that happen?
Well, I don't think we see it, to be honest with you. The only time you see it is when there's a plasmoid formation. You're not going to see it because you're not lighter than the sand. I mean, you physically will not be lighter than the sand, even in your body.
Well, I think you are lighter than the sand, though, because if you're majority water and lighter mineral elements mostly, right? The sand is going to be quartz and stuff like that, and it's going to be more dense than you are.
You would say that, but then we dig up the Egyptian desert and we find bones on the ground and tons of sand was covering it.
Right, because of gravity, that doesn't play out. It's like how you could bury a rock in leaves, right?
So you're trying to say that there's sand somewhere where the gravity does not apply, where you float out of it? Is that what you were saying?
There would have to be a certain depth where the density of the material just like, plays a more significant role in terms of the separation.
You would
just
have
based off of centrifugal force in general, right?
Yeah.
There would have to be a spot of equilibrium, more or less, where
right, each particle was weighed individually instead of the mass. And then, I mean, but that would mean that your bone was still more tense and still stay under. It would have to be a reversal, wouldn't it? It would have to be it's somewhere in there that has a reversal of gravity to be the anti-gravity field that would, you know what I mean? Float it.
So
that's what they're saying.
So does common sense then dictate that plane would exist at your phase change? Right. So when that would be the deciding factor of your phase change from, like crust to mantle.
Well, it's interesting because it's going to work out that way, that it would be that type of energy in between the two hot sides. So yeah, but
that's where I'm going.
How the reaction looks is something I'd be very interested in seeing.
Oh, me too. Because it happened, I think it happens over a lot of time. Surface time. Now, who knows what underground time looks like because we're not there. But happens over a lot of time.
Yeah. Oh man, that's crazy. So I didn't think about it that way. If it would make sense that if you were in an environment that was different than ours, that some of these things that we think are very hard to do would have been natural for them. Based on their environment they were in, it would have been second nature. It's like the waterfall running backward. You just don't realize it till you're there.
Yeah, that's for sure. No, waterfall running backwards. That's funny.
Well, physics is backwards, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, no, it is right, mirrored.
Yeah, which is kind of ironic because Egypt's, Ankh, you put the mirror in the center, and you find out what it really is.
Yeah, you said it the other day. It's your infinity, and then you have your two poles with the cross.
You have your cross. Yeah, you literally have your Christian cross. The nice Templar cross is literally right there in front of your face. Mm-hmm. There's no getting around that. I mean, wow, were they putting something behind a shield that the arrogant would never figure out because they weren't worthy. But for those who were, they'd see it all around them. And I don't, buy into all the stuff necessarily good, bad, evil. Maybe it's a time thing. I don't know anything about them, to be very honest with you. And for anybody that has power, I just think that in some way they screwed somebody over to get it. And they're not doing it, for the nicety of everyone. So, because it's not human nature. But I do think that it was very successful in a campaign of keeping our history to be, where we could figure it out now.
Yeah, and you talk about the idea of gatekeeping and stuff like that. Aside from gatekeeping, I mean, there is apparently, and I know this is a little bit of two sides to the coin, but thankfully there are, keepers of the secrets, and you might get bitter over the fact that the secrets are kept. But if they weren't kept, you'd have no idea. So, just I think that there's been a couple points in history where humanity has started to catch up, to these things, only to be knocked down. And it's only till now that it really has become challenging, to control the information. Because you look at something like the more recent event in the scope of history, right? Of like the Library of Alexandria, and there was an inherent danger with having all of that knowledge all in one place, to the point where it just needed to be destroyed because it posed an exponential threat to the Roman Empire. Like, because there were people in the Roman Empire that would have had the nuggets, of information and stuff. And what would they be if it all gets out? What would they be if everybody had it? So in an act of self-preservation, you destroy these things, and then you look at, today in moderns, then you look at the Renaissance, and in the Renaissance, people started picking up on this stuff again, and they were, hung and tried, and, the church restructured literally to shut it down, separate religion and science, and that happened in the Dark Ages. You had guys like Leonardo da Vinci, who probably well knew most of this stuff in a very, in one form or another, but they could not outwardly say it. So then they start, occulting all of this knowledge through alchemy and stuff,
Well,
and then putting it in allegory.
he had the flood depicted in the back of the Mona Lisa. So if you take out the picture of Mona Lisa, you see, and just like blow up the rest of it, you'll see the flood. So yeah, they don't get me wrong. I'm not mad at the gatekeeper. That's not what I am mad at.
Yeah, no, it's not that. I know you're not mad. I'm just saying that it's at the point now where you look at information just being so readily available and so open for conversation about what it all means amongst people, where this previously had not been the case, and it becomes very hard to suppress. But they still try to suppress it because at the end of the day, like, they try to, kind of hinder your free speech and put all these societal rules in place where it's like, if they can't restrict you one way, they'll try to restrict you the next way from spreading the word. But it's gotten to the point where it's like that whole old school idea of being able to keep the secret is crumbling.
Well, okay. So it's the human element that gives me trouble in the whole system. It's not the secret, not the fact that it was kept, not the way it was kept, anything like that. It's a human element. Humans are bad at things, and you don't mean to be destructive in it. You don't mean to be the gatekeeper and pick only your friends. You know what I mean? You don't mean to do all that stuff, but that's the way human nature is. So it's like you have to attain a form of divinity to really understand it. If God tells you it's coming out and you need to put it out, and you become the gatekeeper, you're 100% in the wrong. If he tells you have to wait until a certain time, by all means, that's his way of telling you that's the way it has to be. I'll understand that. But far too often people get too much power and they're the gatekeeper and they think that they can rule over you. And you see it in history, like, Roman Catholic Church just burned people at the stakes all the time because they felt that they were the best gatekeeper. And they weren't. They're just a horrifying bunch of people in history is what they are. And I just think, when you get a divine knowledge, it's your job at the right time to put it out in the way that he wants you to put it out. Not in the bad way. You got to keep all that stuff hidden.
Jarvis said it the best the other day. He said, the answers come to those who are ready to receive them. You know,
Right.
and that tends to be absolutely true. And you know, if what Blues Traveler said back in the day, they said the answers are getting harder and harder, and the answers come to those who pray. You know, so you know, if you know you're faced with the hard answers, you know, and you actually divinely seek these answers, and then you are also ready to receive the answers, they will come. They always do.
So I told you about I sold my dad's table saw. I also removed all other earthly attachments except for my wife and kids and things like that, right? So not really concerned about too many of those other things, man. They're going to go on long after I do, unless, you know, the big man has a better plan where I can walk the earth for 7,000 years first. But I don't know that that's ever going to come true. But to be honest with you, man, there comes a point where you know it's time to get it out and be done with it. And it's figuring out how you want to show the world where it sticks and you're not dead right away where they got nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part about it. It's like, dude, the information becomes easier and easier. As you work the problem's working you. It really becomes easier and easier. You think it's harder and harder because the questions get hard. No, the questions become less and the answers become plentiful. That's the way it works. So
yeah, there does come that point in time where like, and it often happens abruptly and, you know, overwhelmingly, but things just snap together all of a sudden. It makes sense. And you know, you see the order of the pieces the way that they're supposed to be. It's just how it goes. And sometimes it's overwhelming to the point where you don't even know what to do with it. You know, like that tends to be the difficult thing, is bringing that greater knowledge into something that's constructive.
well, I often tell people, man, I'm not a great builder. What I'm great at is that I can see how things fit together. I can see the path very clearly. Okay. And doesn't mean I build everything right, because I won't. But what it means is I know the process to get there in every single step because I see right through it. Like, good for instance, we were talking about Jack Staffardi, right? And once you cut out all the rest of the talking and you got really down to what that man was trying to say and how he was refuting a point and telling you the actual answer that was literally right in front of your face. But because you listened for you and you listened for the joke and you didn't listen to the knowledge, you couldn't see it. But then when I cut out all the rest of it, you see it clear as day.
Right. And there it was. Exactly. Good old Jack.
Well, Jack. Schmuck.
Fucking schmuck.
I just think it's ironic in that way, right? And you send that to other people, and I don't think they know what to make of it.
No, you,
Like,
you happen to be right.
Did you pull this out of like 20 podcasts? No, just one.
Well, you know, with the stuff that's going on, you know, like you know, and this is where it gets dicey. Okay. I feel like the firm understanding of all these things, like, and all that's implied by it, okay, is not for everybody to get and understand. But there may be a benefit to them through the use of it, whether they understand it or not. So people will benefit from the stuff, from the technology, from the advancement, and all that sort of thing. But truly, the ones that become enriched by it are the ones that understand it and how it works, because this is not your basic mechanical system where you could simply see how it ought to move and put it together, and then it's like, oh, there it is. You know, and people do that with cars now, right? It's like you ask any old person, well, oh yeah, how does every function of your vehicle operate, right? Most people don't know. Some might. The ones that do, it's no sort of deep philosophy involved in it. It's just from a very basic mechanical perspective. But all the stuff that we're talking about transcends that mechanical perspective into the abstract, and that's not something that you could just explain to somebody or give to somebody. It's something that they need to be able to find within themselves to understand. And not everybody will. And that's sort of the beauty of it. Because you could give the gift of its benefit, but really the person that wins, in my opinion, is the person that understands it, because it transcends just the technological benefit.
Gerald was right. It'll stay lost to those who aren't worthy. He was 100% right.
I've always said it. There's nothing that anybody could say. You could be guided in a direction. You could be brought to your attention to things that you ought to be attuned into, to say, hey, listen, this is the nugget you got to follow here. But you have to be able to find these things yourself to be fully immersed in the understanding. That's it. It's plain and simple. Like, we could sit there and explain until we're blue in the face, and the people that won't get it until they've experienced something that makes it click for themselves. And that's it. Plain and simple.
Yeah, it's crazy that way.
Usually it's right within. Usually it's right within.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the greatest secret of people in Inner Earth, is they belong there. You know what I mean? I always think of it as a greater place than where we're at now. Maybe I could be 100, wrong with that completely. But if it is, then you belong there. You deserve the longer life. You deserve to experience more, because you worked with your fellow man. You did the right things. You made the right relationships. You know what I mean? Because none of this is going to be all done by one person. I'm sorry, it just won't. You're going to have to do it by multiple people, because there's always parts of the puzzle that God didn't tell you. You know what I mean? So there's always that comes into a better society, and it makes you all work together no matter where you are.
Yeah, that's it. And until you experience being one with the whole, within yourself, like, you'll never understand these things, just generally. Yeah, that is the difference. That is the fundamental difference.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you, I'm still intrigued, man. Could that lost planet be? I'm sorry, John. Go back to one more time to go back to the woo. Could that be where they came from? Because that would be just like totally off the chart.
Where came from? I missed that. I'm sorry.
So I had mentioned, was it Mars people came over to the planet Earth and went into the center of the Earth?
Yeah.
That planet that exploded over there between Jupiter and Mars, where was it, Ceres or something like that, is the moon that's still orbiting over there, or Ceres, whatever they call it. If that was a planet and that's where we originated from, as far as history we would know, and again, that's just a thought out there. Could it have been, there's a barrier right there, just like the end of a magnetic field, where it suddenly drops off and changes the whole area of it, just like a scalar wave, right? It goes out to that one function and then it stops and drops off and goes to the next one. Could that be the zone where it just got too close to it and broke it? And then you get to a Jupiter state where, things are kind of broken. It doesn't feel like it's right. It like it was once a whole planet and then it broke and lost some field somewhere, and now gravity's uncontrolled, where that last field would control the gravity. So,
if you think about Saturn, right, and the rings around Saturn, that might actually be an example of when your density of materials like starts to screw up, because you have the ring around, and the higher density stuff, like, and then you have like all hydrogen seas and stuff underneath it. Like that could very well be a case where, like, you have matter floating through liquid phase stuff to the exit just because of extreme pressure differentials and gradients, and then it just becomes trapped in a magnetic field in orbit, and there you go. That's, like, never really heard that said, and it's probably not correct, but like, there's sort of an example of the human floating up through the sand, right?
Yeah. I just think it'd be so interesting for society to have evolved completely, understood everything. Then they had to go to the primitives like us and deal with us on a daily basis, and it's more like lab rats to them. You know what I mean? So, and I hate to say it that way, but that would be the equivalent of knowledge and what's going on. Doesn't mean that they feel that way inside and would see us that way. You know what I mean? Because sometimes
Right.
they believe in God as well, and they would, you know what I mean, see you as
Well, I
equal.
always said, like one reason why this stuff is kept under wraps may be just that, like, whatever the truth is might just be like something that, you know, would just be very disenchanting to, it may be just something very disenchanting, something like you'd rather ought to just not know. And I find that the truth is often that way, right? There's uh, dumb and happy, bliss and ignorance, the whole nine yards with that. Like if the truth was absolutely positively known on a factual basis and it was just out there, like is that something that would make you feel more enriched in your life? Or is it something that would, kind of put a wrench in that tire? Like kind of got to ask yourself that.
I'll be honest with you, Joe. There's people like me that would say, let's absolutely see it and we can deal with it. Then there's other people in society where their head is stuck in their cell phone and they don't want to know anything about it. And they just want to TikTok it along. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And
no, that's true. Right. If you're able to see the good in the present, right? No matter where you're at, if you're able to see the good in the present, then what's the difference what the end is? Right? Sort of, you're just enjoying the ride, whatever the end is, you hope for the best. And if it's not what you
no,
hope for, then it's just on to the next.
I'd rather know it all and be driven mad by it than know nothing. And that's just me.
Yeah. I'm listening to what I just said and thinking back to it, and it sounds like a little sacrilegious. Like, again, this is just me open-mindedly speculating and stuff. I mean, I know what my own personal beliefs are, and um, I don't find them to be as dark and ominous, I suppose. But you never know.
No, you never know. But hopefully we find out something good from it. To be very honest with you, I think that's where I want to end this show at. Is I honestly hope that if there is a civilization down there and they are more advanced than us, that we do the right thing and have an advanced society in the future and
Yeah,
not start over.
you've been summoning them from the little black running shadows. Where do you think they come from?
Hey man, if one shows up in my garage, the little shadow man, he's having a beer with me in a conversation. So, and that's just the way it's going to be. Unless he runs too fast, then I'll just sit in the middle of the room and wait.
Yeah, you're gonna like summon the devil like Frank Zappa, like titties and beer, and it's just gonna be Bozio with a mask and his pickle.
I wasn't going to that aspect of it, Joe. I was more into the conversation than the beer and the boobs.
It was a great song. It was the darkest night. There was no moon in sight. The stars ain't shining because the sky's so tight. Oh, great song.
Oh wow! All
I'd
right,
end it
Joe.
on a Joe note. Come on, bro.
Well, you got it, man. All right, man. It's a great show, Joe. Totally awesome, man.
Yeah, man. And on to next week. We'll be back live. And I appreciate everybody hanging in there.
Bye, on, guys. Have a great night.
All right. Peace and love.